Artificial intelligence has forever changed marketing. But is AI helping, or is it just hype? I'm Chris Heineman, and this is Putting the AI in Marketing. Real talk, real insights from real humans who are definitely in the loop. Let's get into it. For more than 20 years, if you wanted to win customers online, you needed SEO. You chased rankings, you chased backlinks, you chased the number one spot on a page of blue links. But is that Google search page still relevant today? More and more, the answer to what should I buy or who should I hire comes straight out of an AI chat window, no click required. So today we're asking what happens to everything marketers spent decades building and what actually determines whether AI recommends you or your competitor. Debbie Chu, a marketing strategist who has spent her career in SEO, is now helping marketers navigate the shift into AEO, GEO, and digital PR. She joins the pod. Debbie Chu, welcome to the podcast of Putting the AI in Marketing. It's just a delight to see you. Something's going on in marketing right now, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on the pod than you. So how you doing today?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Doing well. Excited to talk about all the things AI and marketing related.
Awesome. All right. I hope you're staying cool where you're at because it's probably, I know you're over 100 degrees out there. So let's get right to it. Your feed, whether it's an Instagram feed, a Facebook feed, a LinkedIn feed, or wherever you're getting your social media from, is probably blowing up like mine. It's all about SEO, AEO, and GEO. And that's really what I wanted to have you on the pod today to talk about that. So we're going to start with kind of the ABCs here, the building blocks. So talk to us about what is SEO and kind of the evolution into GEO.
Yes. So search engine optimization pretty much started as a practice to earn visibility and improve visibility within search engines, namely Google. And so we've been doing that for the past like 20-ish years. But then, a few years ago, the rise of like ChatGPT, Claude, and all the other LLMs have kind of changed the way that people search for information. So we used to go onto Google, search a few keywords, and we'll get like the 10 blue links. And so search engine optimization was all around like, how do I show up higher in those 10 blue links? Now with the LMs, you no longer get that 10 blue links. You just get an answer. So you ask a question and then it'll come back and kind of synthesize the information on the internet and get back to you on what they think is, or what the LMs think is the right answer for a question. And so that's kind of where it changes. Like, I think from a technical perspective, it's still somewhat similar in terms of like, it's going out there to look for information. But now it's kind of like aggregating that information and then sharing that with you. Whereas before you had to go do that aggregation step yourself. You'd have to click through each one and then determine like, okay, which one makes the most sense for me. So it's kind of like making it easier for you to get to an answer more quickly. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, like what this whole AEO, GEO is about, is like, how do I then get my brand to show up in these answer engines, in these LLMs? And then there's like a lot of, I guess there's a lot of things that are a bit different between the two sort of practices, and happy to go into that in more detail in a bit.
Yeah. For our audience out there, define these. If you're not familiar with the acronyms, SEO, search engine optimization, AEO, answer engine optimization, and then GEO, generative engine optimization. And I kind of like to think of them as, well, with Google, like you mentioned, rankings, you've got a list, you've got the blue links. And then with the AEO, you're getting a specific answer to a question that you may ask in the model of your choice. And then the GEO, I kind of think of it as the brand. It's going to surface the brand, the company. So I think collectively you want to be, that's the sweet spot, if you will, is you want to make sure that you're kind of hitting that GEO spot so that your brand as a company is really showing up and taking that leadership position and showing up so your competitors aren't showing up as well. So you've been doing this for, a long time. SEO has been around for more than a couple decades. And, you mentioned 3 years ago, there was kind of this pivot. Kind of walk us through, what that looked like when that pivot started to happen. What's changed in such this short amount of time?
Yeah. So previously with SEO, we were looking a lot at like, excuse me, things like traffic. How much traffic does the search engine drive to my website?
Mm-hmm.
And now, since the search journey has kind of shortened a little bit, when people visit your website, it's not necessarily during that information top of funnel stage. It might
Right.
be when they are a little bit closer to conversion, when they're almost ready to buy. And so most businesses might see less organic traffic overall, but when they do get to your website, they are going to your product pages, your pricing, your service pages, like your very bottom of funnel pages, and they're more likely to convert. So you're going to see higher conversion rates on
Yeah.
your pages from that traffic from LLMs. So I think that's like the biggest change. And then outside of that, we are now looking at like prompts, like tracking different prompts as opposed to keywords. And then also thinking about like, um, are we actually being cited in or mentioned in the response? Not necessarily are they clicking a link to get to our website? So there's just
Mm.
a few like areas that we need to be mindful of when we're tracking the success of like these efforts.
Yeah. So it sounds like the way people are discovering, researching, evaluating, purchasing from companies has fundamentally changed. Or am I overstating the impact of AI search, or is it here to stay? And this is really kind of, we've made this pivot in how we're searching now for what we want to purchase, whether a consumer, I need a pair of jeans, I need a restaurant, whatever it is, or as a B2B SaaS company who's got the best, contact center solution.
Yeah. I mean, I think a good way to look at it is like within your family and friend network, do you see people using LLMs more often when they're asking questions instead of like going directly to Google? And
Hmm.
I think for me, that is definitely what I'm seeing. Even folks that maybe were a little skeptical about using I can see that they've changed over time. Like they've been a little bit more open to it.
Hmm.
Google is showing you AI overviews, so
Yeah.
you're it's
Yeah.
kind of getting shoved down your throat in a sense of like you
Yeah.
can't avoid it.
Yeah.
And so I think it just due to how easy it is for us to now get the answers that we want, for us to ask more complex questions that we weren't able to do before. I do think that folks are just going to naturally change their behavior to lean more towards like using LLMs. With that said, I think fundamentally what works well for SEO, what is good for SEO is
Hmm.
also good for AEO and GEO.
Right.
And so despite, companies have spent a lot of money over the years on SEO, that's still going to be important in the sort of new age of search.
Right. Right. You read my mind. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater with our SEO, right?
Yeah. Let's not throw the baby at all.
I hear. So, you mentioned something. You talked about Google looking at your website and rankings, and you could pay to get those rankings up, et cetera. So, how are these models actually searching? What are they going out? I mean, they're obviously going to be looking at your website and the
Right.
information that's on that website, the copy, the text, the formatting, the structure, the JSONs. I was just updating a website today for a client here at Refugio Partners, and updating all of that code that goes in there now, because that is something that the AI crawlers are now looking at. So
Right.
I'm just wondering, if you've made this investment as a business or a nonprofit, and you can't throw that investment out, so to speak, right? So it's so critically important that you understand what these models are looking at. So for people that are out there listening and watching this podcast, explain to them how these crawlers are actually working. What are they looking at?
Yeah. So I think one way to put it from like a high level perspective, there's kind of like three buckets. One, which you kind of touched on earlier, is around technical accessibility. Can both search engines and answer engines get to your site
Hmm.
and read what's on your site? Or are you like blocking them from actually accessing your site, therefore not even knowing that you exist? So that's one thing to think about. Like, how do I make sure that LMs can see and read my content? How do I structure it in ways that are easy for them to understand? How do I maybe like add schema to make it more like
Right.
machine readable? So those are definitely the things to think about for that first bucket. And then the second bucket would be around internal consistency. So the messaging that you use when you talk about your products and services and your brand, is it consistent across the website? If there are inconsistencies, that's confusing to both LLMs as well as users. Like, what exactly are you?
Hmm.
And then the third bucket would be consensus outside of your website. So it's not enough for you to say, like, oh, I am the best digital PR in the world. You have to have other folks who also feel the same way and describe you in in that way as well. So, you know, you can say what you want about your brand on your website, but are other folks outside of your website, other companies, other businesses, are they saying similar things about you? So that's what informs LMs of like their sort of worldview about you
Right.
and your brand. So these are the three things that you kind of have to think about: the technical aspect of accessibility. And then the second is like messaging consistency on your website. And then the third part is like, is that messaging consistent outside of your website?
Right. Right. You mentioned something digital PR. I want to get to that, but I want to circle back on something here real quick. I don't think what a lot of people realize with these crawlers, and if, when they're looking for data and why the data needs to be credible, that
Hmm.
your brand consistency that's out there, it's looking at that and it's looking at its credibility. And if the model, it's almost like there's a consciousness about the model. If the model doesn't believe it,
Hmm.
it's going to save its own reputation, for
Hmm.
lack of
Yeah.
a better phrase. I don't know any other way to put it, but it's gonna look at you and say, well, wait a minute. So because we're not really trusting what we're seeing here, there's mixed messages, there's mixed data, there's mixed structure in your site, whatever it may be, the digital PR aspect, things aren't lining up here. We're going to protect our own self and our own reputation, and the models will call it
Right.
out, their reputation, and be recommending other companies. So it's something that people need and companies need to be aware of. Digital PR. I'm so glad you brought this up because I know you're leaning in super hard on this. I've been in the PR AR game for a long time as well, but explain to folks who may not be familiar with this term digital PR, maybe how that is different from traditional PR and public relations.
Yeah. So the way I sort of see the difference between traditional and digital PR is that traditional would be more of like your TV, news, media, like physical sort of
Trade and
press.
business press.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then digital PR, I actually see it as very a little bit broad. So I kind of bucket it as like any third party site that is not your competitor, that's not your own site, and that's not like social media that potentially could be talking about your brand. So you can think of like if for SaaS companies, it could be like integrations that you work with, those partners that you have, like if they're able to talk about you and you talk about them, like that's positive for like from a digital PR standpoint. I think
Hmm.
fundamentally, digital PR is around earning visibility with third party sources that your
Hmm.
audience already trusts. So that's kind
Hmm.
of like how I
Right.
define digital PR. So it can be like digital publications, like trade publications online. I think that's one aspect. Another would be like getting on podcasts and going on like certain YouTube channels that your audience already listens to and pays attention to. Like getting on those platforms, that's what I consider is digital PR.
Right. Right. Yeah, for our tech heads that are out there, your G2s, your Gartner Peer Insights, your Trust Pilots, all great sources for the models to be looking at and crawling that information. And then like you mentioned your partners, what you can do around news articles, videos, blogs, whatever you're doing, and not just what you're doing, but what they're doing and what they can say about you. Get a placement in
Right.
Forbes if you can get it. Get it on that Forbes, Cloud 100, for example, right? All
Hmm.
really credible sources that the crawlers are going to look at and say, hey, we see Acme Widget Company on there, and so we're going to be referencing that company. So, in somewhat the premise of public relations, necessarily the practice of it hasn't changed. It's just kind of the application into now that we've got LLMs looking at this information and actually giving it high rankings, if you will, as credible information so that you show up in those models. So I think it's more critical than ever that companies be looking at this. Do you in the work that you're doing on this, and I know you just spoke at a recent conference about digital PR,
I mean, are there some really specific strategies and tactics that are just no brainers that companies can be doing that you've seen that have had a success rate with these models to increase their presence?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I think it's just knowing that this area of like marketing is important and spending time to number one, understand it. Number two, like taking baby steps towards it of like, okay, maybe let's get our leadership team on different podcasts or let's get them to write some thought leadership content and do some guest blogging.
Hmm.
Like, I think there are ways to do digital PR in a like without having a huge budget, but really the goal is like, how do I get my brand out there, brand's name out there beyond just my website? So I kind of center around that. Outside of that, I think really thinking about like when you create content on your website, how can you create assets that are going to be like attractive to journalists? And that
Mm,
tends to be like
mm,
data journalism research
right.
reports. So those are the things that, I've worked on at our previous company together, and that those are things that I see consistently work for businesses, no matter like the industry or like type of business. So in my talk, I kind of I give this example of like Martinelli's. It's probably going to be too long to talk about it, but essentially, I created an idea of like, let's pitch Martinelli's as like the original mocktail. Original mocktail is probably Shirley Temple. That's what folks
Right,
associate is the
right.
original mocktail. But I would argue that Martinelli's, it was actually around like even before Coca Cola, and so how can you pull on that thread and create a story around like, okay, Martinelli's was the original mocktail. And then I would say we could also do a survey of like maybe let's say Martinelli's is trying to reach more of the millennial Gen Z audience. They can do a
Hmm.
survey of like 1,000 non-alcoholic drinkers about like behaviors around like non-alcoholic drinks and like the options that are available to you. So having this like data study, pulling like interesting things from that study to create like here's some interesting stats about non-alcoholic drinking. We can try to pitch to a bunch of different publications about this storyline that we've essentially created through this data study. So that, in a nutshell, that's kind of like one of the examples that I walk the audience through in my talk.
Yeah, how was that received? I mean, did you get some people coming up and talking to you and like, this is a whole new world for me. What you said kind of just blew my mind. Where do I start with digital PR?
Yes, yes. So definitely a lot of like interest and people like very positive feedback after the talk. One feedback that I got was like, "Oh, you need to pitch this to Martinelli's," which I still need to do. So I think
Good luck.
like
Good.
thank you. Like kind of just my goal getting up on stage was really explaining to people like, okay, this is an area of like SEO, AEO, GEO that people do not talk about enough.
Right.
When we think about AEO, GEO, we think about like what's on our website, and that's great. Like that's like fundamental, but at the same time, a lot of like the citations in LLMs, especially like when you get to when your users are typing something that is a bit more commercial, the LLMs will tend to cite third party sources and not your own website. And so
Mm,
you have to show up again in those third party sites. Like you have to have a good rating in G2, or, if, and a nerd wallet is writing a listicle, you need to be
mhm,
on that listicle because that's going to be what the
mhm.
LLMs will base their answers on. And so I really just wanted to emphasize like what is digital PR, why it exists, and why it's important, and how to actually like start doing digital PR for your business.
Yeah, and it's I think an important takeaway too. It's not about one-offs either. You can't just kinda get a
Mm,
listing and you're good to go. It takes consistency. It takes
yes.
continuous management of doing this so that you will kind of build that credibility with the models and
Right.
stuff. And do these companies realize this? I mean, as they've been laying off more and more people, and there's more consultants and contractors out there, right? I mean, this takes a lot of work. I mean, there are tools that you can use to listen.
Hmm.
Some companies are building their own tools to listen, and then they can tap into calls and video calls as well. But they may have their own agents doing other things. You can, SEM Rush, SEMrush, what's another one? Profound is another one that can
Yes.
listen. So you've got to have people that are actually managing these applications and listening, and then to bring in this data to ensure that the company is showing up in the right way as well, which
Right.
is critically important, right?
Right. Exactly. I think um, it's a lot of folks are, tracking the prompts within those tools. And I think there's a lot of like splits in terms of like how you can look at the data. You can look at the
Mm-hmm.
sentiment, and that's an area where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
maybe, maybe all the LLMs are citing you, but they're in they're citing you in a negative way. And so at the end of the day, your metrics might look good in terms of like, oh, my brand is being cited 90% of the time. But
Mm-hmm.
then if your sentiment is like very low, then that's a huge opportunity, like an area that you should really look into. Like,
Yeah.
how do I actually improve that? And in order to improve that, it's going to it's typically going to rely on like how do you get third parties to say that you are a trusted brand?
Yeah.
Because again, like that's what they are basing that sort of opinion on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating to me that we're tracking prompts, right? As a data point
Yes.
that you've got to
Yes.
look at. I mean, I see it built into CMS if you're using a Wix content management
Yeah.
system,
Yeah.
for example. You can see on the back end that it can do that. Um, so what happens? You've done everything right. You've got a great website, messaging's bang on. The schema is, your data, you're structured good. Your markup and the site is all tight and it's good. You've got brand ambassadors out there talking, saying the right things. Sales is saying the right things. Your CEO is saying the right things. CMO, everybody's on board. There's consistency. But what happens when something is inaccurate? It's outdated, maybe proportionally influenced by a negative review on Reddit or a Google review or whatever. Can digital PR play a role here and to manage that and to maybe swing that pendulum back and make some corrections?
Yeah, I think definitely yes. um, I think again, it's part of like this whole idea that people still need to be educated that, like Reddit comes up a lot when folks are asking questions, and LLMs will cite Reddit and kind of like use that as if it is the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's not so much like manipulating what's on Reddit, but actually
Mm-hmm.
like trying to be active in those communities. And then kind of there might be misconceptions
Yeah.
within certain communities about your brand, about your policies. And so you going in there, kind of letting those folks know, like, hey, there might be some sort of uh, confusion about like our policy, and it means XYZ instead. That sort of behavior will help shape kind of both your users' perceptions of your brand,
Yeah.
but also like as you have more like positive reinforcement about like your brand in these communities that matter, then I think the sentiment over time will improve. So
Yeah.
to answer your question, yes, like it is definitely possible. It is definitely something that you need, like businesses need to look into of like, are what number one, like what is being cited? And then number two, like, how do I try to influence, not manipulate, but like, how do I try to influence that? How do I monitor that? How do I jump into those conversations at an earlier time instead of waiting like a year later to answer something
Right.
in a subreddit?
Again, all traditional PR tactics, that
Yeah.
hasn't changed. It's just, again, aligning to these models to ensure and you're managing all of this consistently across the board. So when I was thinking about bringing you on the pod, one of the things that kind of got my attention that you said was you wanted to end the SEO, AEO, and GEO debate, and you wanted to call it CEO. What is CEO? I know what it is, but I want you, tell our audience, what is CEO? Because I think you got to trademark this.
um, so like a year ago, when we still haven't, I feel like as an industry, the SEO industry hasn't really decided what to call this new sort of practice of AEO, GEO, AI search optimization. There's so many acronyms, and I felt like we were mainly arguing semantics,
Yeah.
but rather I think fundamentally what we've been trying to do and what we should have been doing all along was to just focus on the customer. And so CEO, the acronym stands for Customer Engine Optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
I
wanted
love
it
it.
to be
I love it.
something thank you, that instead of like focusing on optimizing for the search engine, optimizing for the answer engine, we should be optimizing for the user. Because again, like who's actually the search engines, answer engines are trying to service the user.
Yeah.
So again, like it kind of all goes back to the customer. And so as long as you are thinking about like when I create this piece of content, how do I optimize
Yeah.
for the end user? There are ways like that'll naturally or the way you write it will naturally be helpful to both LMs and search engines. So it kind of again just all goes back to the customer. And so I wanted the acronym to be focused around like let's not think about like, oh, how do I optimize and manipulate the search engines, but it's more of like how do I understand what my customers' pain points are? How do I write content? How do I show my brand to my customers in ways that resonate with them? And so all the activities that we do, technical SEO, digital PR, et cetera, it all goes back to the customer.
Yeah. Customer centricity. I know when we were working together, people like yourself, Grace Lau, Andrea Bourne, we always used to talk about customer centricity and making sure that our messaging was always very customer centric, looking at it through the
Mhm.
customer lens. Because I think,
Right.
especially for new companies and some of these maybe younger AI founders of these companies that are coming on board and it's just product, 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 that
Yeah.
they need to stop and step back. And it's not about what you're doing, it's about why you're
Yeah.
doing it and
Hmm.
who you're doing it for. Why do you exist? And so a lot of
Right.
things we talked about today, including talking about customer centricity, these are all marketing principles. These are fundamentals.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I don't want people, and I'm bringing this up because I don't want people to get overwhelmed in what we're talking about, because a lot of the marketing principles still apply. Your PR,
Hmm.
what you're doing, being customer centric in your messaging, brand authenticity, brand consistency. Um, in another podcast, we talked about your leadership team now is kind of that top of funnel demand gen engine for you, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of people are creating content that it's not believable. It's being
Yeah.
just kind of pushed out the door for fast execution, and it doesn't have that customer centricity about it. It doesn't have that authenticity about it. So I think that's the shift. And I think principles still apply, marketing principles still apply, but you've got to just kind of make that pivot in terms of how these models again are looking at what you're doing, because people can see it, the models can see it. And when that happens, your brand's in trouble, right? So I think that's that's the takeaway. So
Yeah.
you're a small business out there, you're an enterprise business, small business, nonprofit. You're thinking, where can we start? Is an audit, taking a geo audit, for example, is that a good place to start?
I mean, yeah, I think getting the lay of the land of like, what's showing up for when your customers are typing in certain prompts, like what kind of answers are showing up, what type of citations show up, and then also just understanding, your website, is it actually being um, accessible
Yeah.
to LLMs? And then from there, I think not only auditing your own website, but also like taking a look at like what are competitors doing? When
Right.
are they showing up? Like what
Right.
types of prompts are they showing up for? What's potentially working for them? And so I think yeah, there's a lot of potential ways to understand and like to number one like understand the lay of the land and then start strategizing
Yeah.
like creating understand like figuring out like what tactics do I need to then focus on, what should that overall strategy be.
Hmm.
But yeah, it kind of at the end of the day, like similar to what you mentioned, it's still like fundamentally all marketing.
Right.
And so I think businesses, instead of focusing on like maybe pushing out more AI stops since content is cheap now, I think it's more of like focusing on like
Mm,
how do I make my content differentiated
right.
that actually will stand the test of time, as opposed to like if I spin something up with an LLM, competitor can do the same thing, and so am I just really wasting my time? So
Right.
a lot of
Adding to
it
the
kind
noise.
of right, exactly. So it all comes back to like, okay, what is my brand? What do I stand for? How do I make that apparent through all the marketing that I do, no matter what channel?
Brand. We're doing these podcasts and we keep talking about artificial intelligence, but it's the one word that keeps coming up in every discussion. Brand. So
Yes.
Debbie Chu, pleasure to see you. It's been just a fascinating conversation, and really thank you for educating our audience on SEO to GEO, what those things mean, the relationship, the framework, and how important it is to, again, just got to take a look at your business kind of from a different viewpoint. And that's how the AI crawlers are looking at your business, because their reputation matters, apparently.
Yes, reputation matters. But yeah,
And
thank you for having me.
All right. Great to see you. And let's stay in touch. This is going to be a journey that's going to be fascinating to watch how this all unfolds, and how people continue to kind of maybe manipulate and exploit these models to their benefit. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Putting the AI in Marketing was brought to you by Refugio Partners, an AI consulting and growth strategy firm helping small businesses and nonprofits catch the AI wave. Visit them online at refugiopartners.com to see how they can help your small business or nonprofit do more with less. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube so you never miss a conversation.